Hello everyone, I'm Catherine Woolley. I hope I'm close enough to the microphone. I think I'm better now because I can hear myself talking. So I'm a senior designer at Creative Assembly, and I was going to tell you a bit about what it takes to be a designer. First off, I was just going to introduce myself a little bit. So who am I? I graduated from University of Wales in Newport back in 2009. The university's changed a bit now. It's in Cardiff, but still pretty similar. I've been in the games industry since 2009, so basically when I graduated there was like a week where I didn't have a job. I'm a senior designer at Creative Assembly. As the front slide told you, I'm a BAFTA Breakthrough Brit for 2015. I'm on the BAFTA Games Committee as well. I've been the MCV Top 100 Women in Games twice, and the most important thing is I love video games, which is the main thing I'm sure that everyone else loves in this room as well. So just a bit of background on the games that I have worked on. Point that way. So my introduction to the industry was at EA, and I worked on a series of interactive books for kids on the DS called Flips. Not really what most people would think of as games, and they were so ungame-like we didn't have a rating, as you might notice on the box. But they were interactive books on the DS to try and get kids more involved in reading. From there, I then worked on Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2. And then that was about, at EA for 2 years? No, a year and a half, 2 years. Each kind of project I was on was about 6 months long. But then the awesome bit of my career, not that the other stuff wasn't awesome, was I then went to Creative Assembly to work on Alien Isolation. I spent 3 years, 8 months or something like that working on the game, which is quite a while. Lots of stuff happened in that time. We went from the last generation of consoles to the current generations of consoles, so big changes in games anyway. And now I'm working on Halo Wars 2, which is with Microsoft and 343, making a sequel to Ensemble's first game, Halo Wars. So that's me. So, my talk. So you want to be a games designer, or you want to create games that you think would be really cool, or maybe you want to tell a story that you really, really like and you want other people to listen to. But it's not always that simple when it comes to making games. Design is very specific, and if you want to work in specific areas, it's really handy. So I'll go a bit more in depth on stuff. So what a designer does, what do you think they do? Anyone? You can just speak or put your hand up, whatever. Any? Yeah?
Well, maybe they decide what the character will
Yeah, they could help with that. Exactly. Any others? Yeah?
Keep everything consistent.
Yep, that's definitely something that a designer will be doing.
UI, UX.
Yep, they can be very involved with that. So another example, of course, for any of the children in the audience, if you play Minecraft at home, you're basically making your own things in that, and that's almost like you're making your own game, because you're creating a world and showing it to other people. So think of yourself as like mini game designers, or game designers in the making. So I just grabbed this picture, like I was trying to find things this morning where I could try and explain what a designer would do. So I picked this lovely, I'm trying to think where it was, Kinosaki in Japan, and I thought I'd just point the things. I imagine I can point a little laser here. So for example, a designer would have to do with the people moving around. So that could be with pathfinding, giving them a patrol, giving them points if they're systemic for them to go towards. We've got pathways in a game. Designers who are involved in levels will be creating the spaces that players walk through and making sure they're informed to their final goal, which would probably be like this here. But then you also give the player vision to other things as well that they'll be experiencing, so potentially this one over here. Also highlighting things like enemies, which these really cool kind of statues kind of be something like that. Or it's like, maybe if this game had a traversal system in it, you could say that there's like points here, here, and here to climb up, and you'd be defining things like that and using a rule set to be able to define what the player can do in the game. So I thought I'd use that as a little example. I'll go in more depth as well in a later slide about what designers do, but that's just like a rough kind of overview. So I've got some examples of design teams here. This is a design team. So this was the design team on Flips. Surprisingly, it was just 2 females. Our team, however, was only about 10 people in total, but the design team was 100% female. So that was very different, and it's not usually what people would expect from the games industry. But the job was quite different, as it was interactive books. So it was easily approachable for other people, but I was just like, I want to work in the games industry, I'll do whatever you want me to do, so I love doing that. Now here's another team. So people added because they've joined the team since. This is our design team at Creative Assembly on our team, which is the console team. So you will firstly notice there's a bit of an imbalance with me and there's another lady here. It was, I think, 3.5 years before we got another lady on the design team, which isn't an issue because what matters is the skills of the people working on a team, but it's always nice to have a balance. Since taking like the main photo, like 4 people have left as well because people will join teams and then they'll leave teams if they want to go work on a different project. So you have to be willing to like be really friendly with people, but then have to continue working on if people leave. And then that's absolutely cool. But yeah, so that's like a pretty big design team. Most companies may not have such a larger design team. The whole team is about 120 odd people, and design is, I think we've got 15 currently now. So it's a big percentage of the team are design. However, for a strategy game, you kind of hope that as well. So, breakdown of designers, but not like mental breakdown. So a large team, you'll have, similar to my photo before, very, very specific roles. So that could be, you'd have a mechanics designer, level designers who are working on specific levels and nothing outside of that, campaign designer, DLC designers, to just name a few. Then if you have a medium team of designers, you'd have specific roles, but then maybe additional things that you'd work on alongside that. So maybe a level designer would have some levels, but then they'd have mechanics to look after, and maybe something else of the game that another designer hasn't got the time to work on. Or you've got the small team. So generally this is indie or very small companies where you'd have maybe 1 or 2 designers and they'll have to be all-rounders and be able to do everything. So that's UI, mechanics, balancing, levels, you name it. I'll name it in a sec. Which is actually what this slide is. So I wanted to go through the designer types, which is from my experience in the industry. Not every company follows this same kind of structure. And actually the company I'm at doesn't follow some of this structure, but I know other companies do, so I've kind of included it in. So you've got the level designer. They will generally create environments, they will be using signposting, but in some companies they will just be doing the level itself, they won't be doing anything inside of it. So they might make something in SketchUp, for example, which is a tool that you could use to do whiteboxing. Whiteboxing being a level before it looks nice, for anyone that doesn't know. You could also use other things like Unreal or Maya or 3ds Max or World Machine. We've also got an image here. This was our editor on Alien Isolation, which was our own bespoke tools, which were lovely. And if you're making a game that uses modular assets, which are basically like, if you think of Lego pieces and how Lego pieces can easily go together, you could have a modular environment set that allows you to piece things together really, really quickly, and it helps you iterate on your levels very, very quickly. Then you have narrative designers. They will be writing the minute-to-minute story or dialogue within the game, and also liaise with the level designers and do lots and lots of playing of the game to just get an idea of how everything feels. As well as that, they will have their dialogue potentially robo-voiced in an early stage, which means basically run it through something that the audio team would make, so you can get a robot voice basically speaking out all the dialogue. So at least then you can get it in the level at an early stage and see if the dialogue's going to work. Okay, it's going to sound like a robot, which isn't ideal, but it gives you a good understanding of it as opposed to looking at the game and looking at your script and seeing if they'll fit. Then we have scripters. So at Creative Assembly, level design and scripters are the same thing. But I know at companies like, Lionhead, I know in the past they had scripters and they had level designers. Some places do have a split between the two, because some people just prefer creating a world for you to move around in, and some people like getting more technical and do scripting. So I've got some examples of how you can script in games, from very simplistic things like Twine, which is a really nice tool that you can use to create a story, and it's literally you just piece these boxes together to create it, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, if anyone knows those or remembers those. But I think of that in a game. But there's some really great games that have been made with Twine as well, so you shouldn't just dismiss it because it's just about text. But also if you want to write stories, it's a good thing for that. Then going up a level, you've got Game Maker. I like to use Game Maker. I know people in the audience like to use Game Maker too. So Game Maker can be really simplistic with its drag and drop scripting, where you literally just drag things from the side and put them in, setting up what you want to occur in the game. But then you can make it more complex and use GML, which is their Game Maker language, and that allows you a bit more control over what you're doing, and it makes you feel clever as well if you're just typing it out and you're not a programmer. At least I like to feel that way. Then you've got things like Unreal, where you've got their blueprint system, and you can use that. It's a pretty good system. I've just started using Unreal, but I'm going to stick with Game Maker for a bit in my spare time, but I'll be going on with that a bit more. And then I've got another example of Cage, Creative Assembly game engine tool that we had for Alien Isolation. There's another example of some script. So this was basically the script in a level, which is just checking for things, playing dialogue. Alien Isolation didn't really have much in the way of scripting on its AI, so we let that kind of do its own thing, but we still have to do other things as well. Thank you. Technical designers. So a technical designer does things that the scripters may not essentially need to do all the time. This can come to things like optimizing script, because not everyone will realize the best way to make their script function at the most optimal way to reduce frame rate and things like that. But they'll also do things like create composites. So for example, this was the CCTV camera in Alien. It could be passive or it could be aggressive. Aggressive meaning if you went into its vision cone, you'd be spotted and an alarm would go off. So a composite would generally be created by a technical designer, because it would then be something, or the other term is prefab if people prefer that term, and be something that a level designer could place in their environment, and it would have all the script attached to it already, so they don't need to redo the scripting every single time they want to use that. Otherwise, they would also maybe prototype mechanics for designers or prototype mechanics for the code team, and then they can show how they'd like something, and then it could be put into code. And also script reviews. That's quite handy as well for if people haven't really had feedback on their script before. It's quite a nice thing to have done for you. So now coming into like really specific roles, like a balance designer. So balance designer, you don't generally have that role unless you're on a game that has a lot of numbers that do require balancing. This would be things like damage, different units, lots and lots of very small details in either XML files, Excel, and using a lot of graphs to inform that. So if you want to balance games, then maybe get used to Excel and the VBA scripting and that. But you'd have trouble finding a role specifically for that unless it's at somewhere like Blizzard, where they do constant patch notes, where you can read basically what they've been doing to make the game better or worse in some cases. Then you've got core designer. They'd be looking after mechanics within the game, so controlling how high a counter jumps, the speed at which a bullet moves, how much damage it has, designing the enemies and how they work in the environment, how they react to the player, and the user experience and the UI. And we also have lead designers and design directors. If you like to make games, like get your hands in on it. If you think you want to be a lead, if you become a lead, you won't really get as much work to do, because generally you've got 50-50 split between management and doing work, or you don't get to do any work and you have to manage a team. But it depends on kind of what you like to do, because as a director, you'd have an overall direction on the game, as the title suggests. But they generally see the game at a higher level, so they would be maintaining a consistency throughout the game. Have some water. But as I said, not all companies have the same structure. In a lot of places, the level designer and scripter would be rolled into one. Some companies don't have technical designers because it's quite a fairly new role, at least in our studio as well. And you do find that a lot of the time you get mechanics from core design being handled by level designers as well. So it really depends on the company and their structure. So I thought I'd give you some examples of level creation in Alien Isolation, just to try and like add something special to this. So these are some top-down maps from Alien Isolation. Can anyone notice a theme throughout them at all? I don't know if anyone can. I know I can because I know them all, but no? Okay, so you'll notice there's a lot of loops within the environment. So Alien Isolation, for anyone that doesn't know, features a systemic AI, which is the alien, and he can generally go wherever he wants to go. And in order to make it fair for the player, we had to ensure that the level design adhered to some criteria. So, for example, the player needs to have access to other routes around the environment so they don't get stuck in a dead end with the alien, because it's not fair on a player for that. And they'll hate the game designer or the creators for doing that. So this was involving things like secondary routes, so like this little corridor off here, there's a vent here, vents, ladders as well, just generally ways for the player to get around, but the alien would also use those routes as well. So I thought I'd just give a little bit of insight into that, because most games are generally fairly scripted, so they can be quite linear in their pathing, but we gave it a sandbox feel to allow the player a bit more breathing room so they could try and figure out what to do and have alternate routes. Yeah. Okay, so example tasks for a designer each day. So they won't generally be doing all of these. That's a lot, but actually you can have a day where you are doing all of these. So it involves, like generally in the morning you have a stand-up with your pod. A pod is a group of people within the team, so generally like an environment artist, maybe a programmer, designers, audio, QA, VFX, animators, generally people from every discipline, and they'll meet up in the mornings and talk about what they're doing. Because when you get a team that's so large, you can't really keep an eye on what everyone else is doing at the same time. So pods are great for that. That's just generally a way games are managed from a production standpoint. So a lot of companies use a pod structure. Then with that, you'd be discussing level changes, playtesting your level or levels, doing some scripting, talking with other departments, meetings. Meetings is a big thing. That happens a lot. Making design decisions. Documentation isn't every day. Generally, if you like writing documentation, you'll do that more at the start of a project and then maintaining it throughout, but it's not something that you'll be doing all the time. So maybe if that's something you don't like doing, I wouldn't worry about that. Chasing up issues and fixing bugs. So like you might kind of get from that list of things that you do, a designer has to communicate a lot with their team members. You need someone that can be enthusiastic about their ideas in order to sell them to everyone else, because if you're a bit flaky on what you're trying to get someone to do for their work, they could then easily say, oh, you don't have the confidence in that, so should I be doing this or should I do something else instead? So the designer is kind of the person to help bring everything together. Then I just want to give some shout outs to a few other things. So like game jams. Game jams are awesome. I do 4 to 5 game jams a year. A game jam is a time where generally you take 48 hours and make a game in that time. Generally, they're on weekends. Ludum Dare is in 2 weekends' time for anyone that's interested in game jams. It's basically you make a game by yourself or with a team within that short amount of time. You get a theme that's announced very, very quickly, and you then have to figure out what you're going to do. It's the best way to test yourself, and you create a game at the end of it if everything goes well. So I highly recommend game jams. I always mention game jams. I do the Global Game Jam, which happens once a year in January, and Ludum Dare, as I just mentioned before. There's a few websites that pull together the game jams that are going on at the moment. So itch.io/jams is one of them, so you can see at the moment Birthday Jam is happening, Limerick Gamecraft 2016, in Space Jam, and a few others. Ludum Dare is not on there because that's the start of April. And then you've also got Indie Game Jams, which is run by a lady called Jupiter Hadley, who plays lots of game jam entries and does videos for them on YouTube, which is really, really great. So yeah, these kind of bring together the game jams that are happening at the moment, and I just highly recommend doing game jams. If anyone wants to talk to me about game jams, that's cool, because I'll happily do that. There's even more exciting ones as well. So GDC just happened, and they do Train Jam before that, where the train you take to San Francisco, you make a game on the train. I had a friend who recently did one, which I call Boat Jam. I can't remember what the name of it was. Splash Jam. But you were basically on a boat, and picturesque environment, hot tubs, and trying to make a game while having all of this beautiful scenery around you. There's also a Castle Jam coming up soon as well. And you even get things like a 0-hour game jam when the clocks change. So it's really clever. Just want to give a shout out for BAFTA as well. So as I mentioned at the start, I'm kind of big on BAFTA, but it's great for trying to find new talent and make them apparent to everyone else. So BAFTA do young games designers. So for anyone who's 10 to 14 or 15 to 18, you can enter their Game Making Award and Game Concept Award. So for the Game Making Award, you basically make a game. You have a deadline until the 3rd of June, so you have all the time from now and back when they originally announced it until the 3rd of June to finish making a game, and you can submit it and potentially win Young Game Designer BAFTA, which is really, really cool, and they have like a little award ceremony for it. They usually have celebrity people on stage to announce everything, and it's just really, really nice to help encourage children to making games. So I recommend, if anyone's in that age category, to have a go at it. They also do scholarships. So this lady here, Liz Mercury, is having her university paid for by BAFTA. They do a scholarship fund for so many people every year, and if you get picked, then you won't have to pay for your university fees, which is really great. They also do BAFTA Crew, which is just finished for applications, but it's basically if anyone has 2 years plus experience in the games industry, you can become a crew member, and they have master classes for you to attend and benefit from, as well as then being among the other crew members and finding out from them who are in the industry across the United Kingdom, basically. So that's really cool. They have Breakthrough Brits. As I already mentioned, I'm a Breakthrough Brit, and they're going to be doing it again this year as well. I'm not sure on what the criteria is for it, other than having worked on an outstanding project and being British talent that's rising and really cool. So, yep, that. And then the BAFTA Games Awards. So I thought I'd just give this a shout, because the BAFTA Games Awards are actually next week, on the 7th of April. And they stream it on Twitch. So if anyone wants to watch that, it's really fun, because I like the BAFTA Awards because the juries that vote on the winners for the games all have industry experience. So you know that people that have the credibility to be making these decisions are giving these awards to the games and companies that deserve them. Okay, so ways into design. There's a few different ways you can get in. Not all of them are always applicable. So for example, QA, which is quality assurance, otherwise known as testing. You get a lot of outsourced testing firms in the UK now, which means they don't really work with developers, but you still get embedded testers in some companies. And provided the company has the space and you have the enthusiasm and determination and could do a job, they can sometimes make a space for you and give you a job. We had one person who was the tools tester at Creative Assembly recently become a technical designer, and then last year one of our QA also became a level designer. So it really does happen. It just depends on the company and if there's a job at the time. Internships. So I believe government funding has changed a little bit for internships now, but companies still do them, and hopefully they will be doing them next year. This year, later on this year. And it's basically anyone who's either on their second year of university or graduated from university this year can then apply for internships at companies that do them. And depending on the company, you might be made to make cups of tea. I really hope that companies don't do that anymore. But most companies should let you do work, and then you work with everyone else on the team and find out what it's like to be in the industry, which is really valuable. Sometimes they're 6 months, sometimes they're a year. It just depends on the company and the project and the university. You could come in as a junior. Not that many companies really seem to do junior roles anymore, but they were always for people straight out of university, basically. They are rare, as I've said, but they do crop up every now and again. Standard roles, so just like designer or level designer. Just because, for example, you don't have any experience, doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for things like this, if you have a portfolio of work to show. Because ultimately, if you're really good, then they can see that and they might hire you. Go indie. So I'd say go indie definitely if you have some financial support behind you, because it can be a little bit risky to just throw everything away and just be like, I'm going to make games in my spare time and that's it. But it is a really good thing to do, because if you have a good idea and you make a great game and you get noticed, then it might turn out really, really good. It's always good as well to have some experience beforehand, before going independent, but then maybe if you're making games while you're at school, that's a good way to get some experience, get people playing those games, and then maybe see if you can do that after you graduate from university or finish college or anything like that. You can do modding. So modding is actually still quite common. We have a few people on our team that came from modding, not from modding things like Total War on our team, but actually no, one person on our team used to mod Total War. But in the past we had someone that did some mods for CryEngine, and of course some mods then turn into actual games as well. So it's a great way to get into games if you're not great at visuals, because generally a mod kit for a game will allow you to use all their assets from in the game, so you can just use that to create an interesting experience. Freelance work. I'd say freelance work might be a bit more for if you've got some experience, or if there's people on a team that maybe need a designer or someone else like really short notice, you could potentially help out with that if you've got some good ideas. I can't see my slide. Consultancy, that kind of comes into freelance work, but that's generally if you've got lots and lots of experience and you can charge people a lot of money to go tell them what to do. That's not always the case. There's some good people out there. And then you could also go into other industries as well. If you want to get into games, you don't necessarily have to get into games through games. As well, from what I gather, like architecture firms now use Unreal for creating environments. Of course, architecture is quite a high-level thing to get into, but there are different areas that you could go through to try and get experience that would be relevant towards games. And then finally, I've just got some advice. So, be enthusiastic. I like to think I got a job at first because I was really enthusiastic about kids' books on the DS, and I've just always been an enthusiastic person when it comes to games and making games. So enthusiasm, I'd say, can get you a long way. but don't make that kind of mean you'll get a job 100%. Take in all forms of media. So not just games, watch films, animation, TV, read. Everything is useful for information gathering, because reading and watching things can help you gather more of an insight in how to tell stories. Be creative. You don't just have to like games and try and want to make games. You could paint, you could crochet, that's what I do, and just other things. Any way to like keep yourself creative and keep yourself on your toes, basically. Have an invested interest in games as well, though. So generally, most people that like games are kind of their life or close to that. So it's good to have that interest in games. But even if you don't like games that much and you want to get into art or something like that, that's absolutely fine. Although usually with a designer, you will kind of need to know the other games around, because they are either your competitors or they're good examples of what you can mimic in your game but make better. Play bad games as well as good games. So if you play a bad game, you can learn why it's a bad game, and that helps you with your design knowledge as a sense, I guess. But don't just play the games that you want to play based off reviews, because if they're amazing, brilliant games, you won't see anything that's bad, and you won't be able to try and figure out why that happened in the game. So it's good to have a critical mind. Don't just play digital games or one genre of games. So it's good to play board games as well. They teach exactly the same kind of mechanics as a game might, or card games, anything like that. And don't just be like, I want to make a shooter, I'm just going to play shooters, because every other game around you could inform what your game might need to make it even better. Attending events and networking can pay off. So you're all here right now, that's really cool. There's a lot of people that just don't decide to go to events, and then they wonder why they don't know many people in the industry. Events are like the key way in to knowing what games are being made at the time, finding out new indies, seeing what everyone's creating. It's really handy as well, because then if someone knows you and a job pops up somewhere, they might be able to recommend you as well. So it's like how it's always good to know the right people. Invest in the area you wish to work in. So if you want to be a narrative designer or create stories, then do a lot of creative writing. If you wanted to go to university and you want to do that kind of stuff, maybe take a creative writing course instead of a design course, because ultimately you want to do the thing that benefits you the most. Do game jams. I've already said that, but I say it again. Always work on your portfolio. So game jams help with portfolios if you haven't got one already, or even like if you create a level in Minecraft, something in Little Big Planet, any kind of game where you can create your own levels and then either record it or link it, or just send out something to someone so they can have a look at it. And then it's always good to get feedback on those as well. And then apply for jobs if you're at the stage where you have a portfolio or you've got something to show off, or you feel you're ready. I'd say, yeah, apply to jobs only when you feel like you're at the right stage. Of course, if you're going for something more junior, then that's fine to apply to a job before you maybe have a big portfolio or anything like that. But it's a good thing to think about, or think ahead of yourself on what you might want to apply for. Look at job specs to see what they want from people, so you can cater yourself to that, and then hope they have a job when you come around to looking. I think that's it. Thank you for your time. That was from our midnight launch. I got someone dressed as an alien to come down in Horsham, so that was pretty cool. But yes, so does anyone have any questions related to any of my slides, anything that I might not have covered in my slides? Anything related to design or anything? Yep.
Well, when you were talking about events, can you have a lump sum around the concept or something? Can you just kind of explain what that was? And I was just wondering exactly what that was.
What was that, sorry?
When you were talking about the vectors, you say somehow how different it was, whereas the young game designer
Oh, yeah.
concept something. I wasn't
Of course. So you've just asked a bit more information on the BAFTA Young Game Designer Awards, and I didn't really go into that much detail. So the game concept, I didn't go through, is basically if you can't make a game, so if you haven't got the knowledge of any tools yet, or you're not wanting to do that kind of thing, you just want to create an idea for a game, that's basically what it is. So you submit like a paper document, well, probably like a PDF or something like that, with your game idea, fleshing it out as much as you can. You can add pictures as well to help convey your ideas and what you want to show in the game. You could like mock up examples of what the game would look like, and that's what they're judging it off, what your idea is and if they think it would make a really good game. Is that good? Yeah? Cool, thank you. Yep, behind.
Do you know if there'd be a certain place on the internet where we're able to be more aware of junior or graduate roles? Because mostly it always seems like on most game job websites they're always trying to advertise the top tier roles.
Yeah, so the guy at the column has just asked about if there's anywhere where you can find out about jobs that are more junior as opposed to all the other websites that just advertise for the more senior roles. I think it also is just sometimes a lack of jobs around, because you can find sometimes if you go on somewhere like gamesindustry.biz and look on their jobs section, there's not that much around, and they generally maybe a senior role or a lead, or they ask for 3 years experience or something like that. I would say the only thing would be there's nowhere I don't think that really highlights any of that stuff. I know there's a few accounts on Twitter that retweet jobs. I think it's called like Game Job Bot or something like that. So you can keep an eye on stuff like that. But I think generally you'd find a lot more in the smaller companies, which may not be advertising on those job websites because you might have to pay, I believe, to advertise on those websites in the first place. So it might be good to maybe do a search on Twitter, for example, because a lot of the Indian companies will promote their jobs through Twitter. Or you just maybe apply to a job that potentially wants a bit of experience but isn't, say, a lead or a senior role, and see where you go from there, because sometimes they might give you feedback. You could add in your cover letter that you understand you don't meet the criteria but you think you'd be a good fit for the role, and then say, if you don't think I am, can you let me know why, for example. Yeah, that's kind of it. Sadly, there isn't like anything promoting that, and with the closure of 2 studios in the UK recently, sadly, they've probably hoovered up a lot of the jobs that there were. Sorry. I wish I could help, but yeah, it can be quite rare to find a junior role. I think you just have to be looking at the right time sometimes. But even if it's just not marked as a junior role, sometimes they'll take on someone if they're good enough, even if they don't have the experience. Yeah, that's where networking comes in. So then you might be able to find out about jobs if you go to, so for example, there's EGX Res next weekend as well, where a lot of indie developers will be at, similar to how there's a lot of indie developers here at Norwich Gaming Festival. You could then talk to them and see if they need any help, because if you could help out on their projects, that would give you a credit, and then you can show that work to someone else and say, oh, look, I did this. This is a part of my portfolio. Networking. Any other questions? Yep.
Hi, you mentioned when you were talking about alien isolation that you were kind of working across the kind of 2 different console generations. And I wondered if like the change in tech between the 2 consoles had any kind of discernible effect on like how you designed the game, or do you think it's had an influence on kind of game design changes?
I mean, we definitely included some features to the game once we knew we were going to then release it on Xbox One and PS4, because Kinect was better on the Xbox One, and the PS4 had the camera as well. Oh, and also the PS4 controller, because of course they now have the speaker on it, similar to a Wiimote, and the lights. So we hooked that into the motion tracker in the game, so it would beep from your controller, which is almost then like you're holding the motion tracker, and the color would change as well based off that. I think it would link it into the motion tracker. So definitely yes, like when a new console appears, designers will look and see what they could add to it, if there's anything new to the console to make the game better for that experience. but otherwise it was just, I suppose it was challenging. I mean, releasing on 5 platforms for the same date is quite hard, especially when you then have the added GPU and CPU of a brand new console, which then allows you to make your game look even more beautiful and have more memory in like UI or audio, and then you have to have it match on the 2 generations of consoles, which can be quite tricky. But I think we did quite a good job on the 2. But it's definitely something that people will think of, like with VR being a big thing at the moment and the Oculus coming out yesterday, a couple of days ago. A lot of designers will be thinking of what they could do with things like that, especially with like PlayStation VR. So anyone that was maybe releasing a game for PlayStation 4 this year, they might have already been in talks with Sony to create specific features for if you're playing it with PlayStation VR, maybe. I don't know. Yep.
Can you point out any specific areas in Alien Isolation that you were pivotal in the design choices?
Yeah. I didn't repeat your question. I feel really bad. So you just asked me if I could point out any things I worked on in Alien Isolation. I can indeed. So I did the first Android level, which is Seeks and Comms. So you're introduced to androids for the first time in that. I did the first. Have you not? Sorry, spoilers. Spoilers.
On the shelf for so long.
Although my levels are very early in the game, which is really good. And then the first proper alien encounter, which was the preceding level, where it's you and the alien in a space which you haven't encountered prior to that. So I was really proud of those levels. They were pretty pivotal levels in the game. But as well as that, I worked on the DLC that we released. So we did 5 packs of DLC. I worked on 4 of the 5 packs and did a map for each one, what each of those 4. And that was an awesome experience because by the time you finished a game, everything's almost finished. So, the tools are finished, the art is finished to a certain level. So you have all these pieces that you can place together to make a quick iteration on all the work that you're doing. And that was great doing that because then I could create a level, hand it over to artist, audio, VFX guys, and then they could change things up, add new bespoke art pieces, and make it really nice. And it was just like a really nice quick turnaround time, which when you're starting to work on a game, for example, like because I was on it for over 3 years, when it's in the early stages, the game is quite different to how it is when it's at the end of the project. So that was really, really fun. Otherwise, I worked on some mechanics in the game. So the CCTV camera I showed, technical design didn't make that. I made that with some help from a technical designer as well at times when the maths got a bit too mathsy for me. And like the, what are they called? The computers you interact with. I can't think what they're called. But yeah, like Alien Isolation was so much fun to work on. I never would have thought I'd be able to work on a survival horror game or an alien game and it'd be really, really good. I keep saying really, really twice. So yeah, Alien Isolation was a lot of fun to work on. And that's what I did. Yep, question there?
Question I had is you mentioned design experience with other game genres earlier, like board games and such.
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to know exactly, in your experience of how you've been in the industry, how often that's actually turned up with people that you've worked with. And by which I mean, do you actually have people that have come from other game stuff and worked into the video game industry rather than starting elsewhere?
I'm trying to think if we have anyone. Gentleman's asked if, based on what I was saying earlier about coming in from not digital games and being interested in board games, I don't know if we have anyone that has come from like a board game background. I know we've had people that have also designed board games in their spare time and then created those and been allowed to release them. And we have lots of people that play board games regularly, so there's like a Thursday board game kind of evening thing that people do, and a lot of people play them on their lunch times as well, so just play quick card games and stuff like that. But I don't know anyone specifically that did, although actually I can't think what his name was, but at EA for a while we were working with someone who worked on Magic like really early on, He was from the States, and he had a lot to do with I suppose you could say, the systems within Magic, and just worked on that. Of course, not one of the original designers, but he worked on it for a while. But there are definitely people in the industry, I think usually kind of maybe the old school kind of people that have got that experience within a physical game media. But I think it's definitely something that can happen though, because generally you'll understand games in the same way, even if you're not playing them on a screen. So I think it's definitely valuable to have that interest. Any other questions? Yep.
You talk about portfolios.
Yep.
But besides game jams, I'm just wondering if there's like because the art is obviously, you have art stations, places like that, where everything's more visible, but on the more technical side, it seems to have less of a presence, and I was wondering if there's a way to sort of monitor people's portfolios in the same way so you can compare yourself.
So the gentleman's asked if there's a way to kind of, if there's anything that exists for, are you saying more like technical design, like scripting?
To look at as an example of what someone would do.
Yeah.
To compare yourself.
Yeah, so basically artists have a website called ArtStation, which is awesome. And it's basically just feeds of people posting up their art. I suppose you could say it's like DeviantArt, but less kids doing it and more like professionals in their jobs at the current moment doing like work outside. And if there's anything like that for designers, I don't really think there is much of that. I mean, most people use things like Twitter for sharing that, and then using maybe a indie hashtag or something like that to try and get that out there so people can compare it. But I don't think as far as I'm aware, there isn't anything like that. Although if there is, I think it'd be great, and I'd like to do it, because at the moment all I can do, if I want to explain to people what I've worked on, I can point them to my website, but then they have to go on the website. If they want to look at the game jams, go to the game jam page, download the game jam, and play it that way. So if there isn't anything like that, I think it would be great, and we definitely need that for designers, because it's hard sometimes to show your game to other people. But sorry that I don't have any examples of anything. But I think we're finished on questions now. I guess that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. If you have any other questions, feel free to grab me. I'll be in Norwich for like the next few hours, enjoying outside. So yeah, thank you very much.